I'd like to welcome you to BeMoreNews.com, the news before the news, where we uncover the truth. Truly, truly honored to be in the home, more so a library, a museum of the one and only Professor Larry Gibson. How are you, sir?
Hi, Donnie. How are you today?
Good, good. The book, we have to get an update. And I have a question for you about your book. I mean, you have shared and mentored others, but let's go back to you contacting the late Justice, Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall at 11 o'clock at night. Was there any limitation in your mind? Did you think he wouldn't answer? How'd you do that?
Well, we were trying to get to his house around 8 o'clock, but we couldn't find the place. And then we stopped a couple of times at places thinking that maybe we should go back. The house was located, is still located on a street that had, lake was the important word in it, but there was Lake View, Lake Drive, all because it was around this big lake. So when we finally got to his door, I almost did knock on the door. But then I said, look, I've invested a lot of time into this. The worst that could happen is he could not come to the door, or we could be at the wrong door, or he'd just slam it in our face. So after 2.5 hours of driving around, we took a shot and lucked out. He not only let us in, after dealing with the legal matter that we'd come to see him about, we didn't get out of his house for another 2.5 hours. This is in July of 1975. He got animated and he started talking, and he talked about his growing up in Baltimore. He had 2 young black lawyers from Baltimore. He had been a young black attorney in Baltimore. Maybe that was a connection that was meaningful to him. He knew that we kind of wanted an emergency order that would have more political impact than anything else, and he was very attuned to the significance of media and political consequences in litigation, and so he understood why we were there. He was helpful, and I immediately noticed how different he was from what I'd come to expect from reading. Not only was he friendlier and had a greater sense of humor, but he had a more positive attitude about his hometown, Baltimore, because the conventional wisdom was that he hated Baltimore.
Was this from black media, white media, or just media in general?
Books that had been written by white people and black people, but I'd already noticed that he had been to Baltimore for various ceremonies. He had spoken at the Hopkins graduation. He had come to his reunion at Douglas High School, but still the persistent story was that he had applied to University of Maryland Law School, been rejected, and he hated the city. Well, subsequently learned that he hadn't applied to the University of Maryland Law School. He would have been rejected, but in fact I hadn't. So that's 1975. My next encounter with him was 3 years later, in 1978, when he came to Baltimore for the ceremony that renamed the courthouse downtown in honor of his friend Clarence Mitchell. After the official ceremony, there was a luncheon, and I came up to the justice and asked, would he take a photograph with me? He said, okay. But while it was taking the photographer a long time to snap the picture, and while that was happening, Marshall turns to me and says, so what am I supposed to do, kiss you? Now, that's 1978. That's the last thing that he ever said to me in life. But it was not the end of my interest in him. A few years after that, I began to interview Marshall's relatives in Baltimore, and his friends, and some of his neighbors, and even a couple of his teachers. And
would you say he impacted your life?
Well, I was fascinated by him, by what he had accomplished, as I suspect certainly most African American lawyers were, and then black lawyers in Baltimore. So of course I was impressed with this man who, from Baltimore, had gone to the U.S. Supreme Court. You know, Maryland has only had 2 Supreme Court justices, and what a contrast, Thurgood Marshall and Roger Brooke Tawney, the Chief Justice who wrote the infamous Dred Scott decision.
So how does it feel having sat at the feet of a giant like Thurgood Marshall and to become a giant yourself?
I don't know about that.
Yes, you are. You cannot play shy.
But
you've traveled the world. You just showed me a book of umpires that you represented in Cuba, Major League Baseball. You won a case early when we first started talking about this book. A lady told me about a case you won that you've even forgotten about that was unprecedented here in the city of Baltimore. You're a law professor. You've run political campaigns for the first black elected mayor of the city of Baltimore, 12 years, a man who went on to become dean at Howard University, and you've been around. Charles Hamilton Houston?
All I know is I think I need to hire Donnie Glover as my publicist.
But how does it feel? You are, I mean,
I feel,
maybe not a Supreme Court justice, but you are attuned to the struggle of people of color worldwide.
Life has been good to me. I have enjoyed almost perfect health, many good friends and fraternity brothers. I have taught thousands of young people and learned a lot from them. And I've spent 40 years with a beautiful woman. So life has been...
So you've mentored, you've passed the ball, you've kept family first all over the world, but still you haven't said, okay, so what's your legal legacy? Why should the young freshmen at the University of Baltimore, University of Maryland Law School break their neck to get into your class, to come and see you, to come and interview you? I mean, if they know what I know, they would.
I don't know that
you've done everything. You ran an election in Liberia.
Well, part of this, what has helped me, is that about 40 years ago, I, with the assistance of a friend, was able to define fairly clearly, at least down to one sentence, what my kind of general approach, what my goal was in life. And that has been a little bit of a beacon. And it may even sound corny because it's really me talking to me, but I decided in about 1973 that what my approach to life would be is I would try to be a, quote, just and learned man. Then became the question, well, what would I then do? And I decided that my goal in life would be to help other just and learned people succeed. So those have been the two guiding principles of my life. For me to be a just and learned person, and for me to assist other just and learned people succeed. Now, that may sound a little bit corny, but it has been very useful for me as a guiding light for 40 years.
Any advice to aspiring law students across America?
I think that not only law schools, but all young people, that it is helpful sometime fairly soon in their life to try to articulate in a pretty general sense, but in a sentence or two, just what would be their goal. And it does not have to be a specific position or a specific job, but what kind of person do you want to be, and in a general sense, what kind of contribution do you want to make? And then there will be events that will help you move in that direction, and there will be many events that are unknown at the moment, unpredictable. But if one has a kind of general sense of what your objective is, you can take the unexpected developments and propel forward. I frequently speak of the whole process of sailing a ship. The saying about that, to a ship that has set its course, or at least its destination, every wind is a favorable wind. Whatever direction the wind is coming from, the wind can be used to propel a boat forward. It is even possible to actually sail into the wind. In other words, to take a wind that's coming directly to your face and to move forward, if you kind of have a kind of general sense of what direction you would like to head, and if you're flexible enough to use developments, which I call the wind.
Did you learn this on a boat?
No, I didn't learn this on a boat, but I was amazed the first time that I observed up close sailing. that
Why so?
that a person who knew how to sail could use the wind coming from absolutely any direction to go where they wanted to go. That is still, it's still kind of amazing to me that the wind blowing this way you could use to go against the wind.
If only I could learn to use that in politics. We're going to take a pause. Keep watching BeMoreNews.com.